Boom.
Hey everybody, welcome into Folklore and Flourish. We're so excited to see all you little cutie patooties. Today is March 27th. Today is the legacy. Our theme is what remains. So today with the legacy, our tested hero is in his destiny sealed, right? So now with the legacy, we're looking beyond what my lifetime could bring. And it's not because of me, this will happen. Because of me, this could happen. So that's what we're looking at today is what remains when we're gone and the beauty of what our sacrifice creates for future generations. So
Mhm.
we're going to see that through 4 great stories today. We're going to see it through Mandi, Roman, Japanese, and Frankish folklore today. So enjoy these 4 stories, and we will see you after the legacy. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to honor the cultures behind the stories we are about to explore. The tales shared here come from many peoples, lands, and traditions. I do not change these stories to fit modern expectations or to align with today's social standards. Instead, I present them as they were told, sometimes beautiful, sometimes harsh, sometimes challenging. We are not here to judge the past, but to understand it, to listen, to learn, and to honor the ancestors who carried these stories forward. We also share stories from various religious traditions. These are presented in their historical and spiritual context, with respect for their beliefs that they represent. Every culture deserves respect, context, and acknowledgement, and this space is dedicated to doing exactly that. Story 1: Sundiata and the Rise of the Lion King. In the oral traditions of the Mande people, where history is carried through the voices of griots, the memory is treated as inheritance. The story of Sundiata Keita begins not in strength, but in doubt, for he was born unable to walk, a child whose body did not match the expectations placed upon him. And in a world where physical ability often determined perception, he was dismissed, overlooked, and even mocked. Yet beneath this fragile beginning lay something unseen, something that would not remain hidden. And as he grew, so did the tension between what others believed him to be and what he would eventually become. Until the moment arrived when he chose to rise, literally pulling himself upright for the first time, taking steps that were not just physical, but symbolic, marking the beginning of a transformation that would ripple far beyond his own life. His early years were marked by instability, as political forces threatened his family and forced him into exile, removing him from his homeland and placing him in unfamiliar territories. Yet exile became preparation, exposing him to new alliances, new perspectives, and new forms of leadership, shaping him in ways that comfort never could. And during this time, the legend of his destiny continued to grow, carried through whispers and memory, until the call to return became unavoidable. When Sundiata came back to reclaim his place, he did not return alone, but as a unifier, gathering allies from different regions, forming a coalition that reflected not just power, but shared purpose. And at the center of this challenge stood Sumaro Kante, a ruler whose dominance had disrupted balance and instilled fear, creating a force that Sundiata would have to confront not only as an opponent, but as a symbol of disorder. The battle that followed was not simply one of strength, but of alignment, as Sundiata and his allies worked together to overcome what had seemed immovable. And when victory was achieved, it did not end in destruction, but in creation. As Sundiata established the Mali Empire, one of the most influential and prosperous empires in West African history, built upon systems of governance, trade, and cultural development that allowed it to flourish across generations. One of the most enduring aspects of this legacy was the Korakan Foga Charter, a framework that outlined rights, responsibilities, and social order, demonstrating that his impact extended beyond his own lifetime into the structure of society itself, shaping how people lived, interacted, and understood their place within the world. And through the continued storytelling of griots, his life became more than history. It became a living narrative passed down through generations, ensuring what he built was not forgotten, but carried forward, adapted, and remembered. Sundiata's story reveals that legacy is not defined by how one begins, but by what one creates and sustains, that adversity can become foundation, that exile can become preparation, and that the true measure of a life is found not only in what is overcome, but in what continues because of it. And in the end, he stands not only as a king, but as a beginning, a figure whose influence extended far beyond his own time, shaping identity, structure, and culture in ways that still echo today, reminding us that legacy is not something we leave behind, but something that moves forward, carried in the systems we build, the lives we impact, and the stories that continue long after we are gone. Story 2, Aeneas and the Carrying of Troy. In the aftermath of the fall of Troy, when the city had been consumed by fire and its people scattered, the story of Aeneas begins not as one of victory, but of survival, loss, and responsibility. For as the Greeks overtook the city through deception and force, Aeneas was faced with a choice that would define not only his life, but the future of an entire civilization. Whether to fight and fall with what was already lost, or to carry forward what remained. And in that moment, guided by divine signs and inner conviction, he chose to leave, not in abandonment, but in preservation, lifting his elderly father, Anchises, onto his shoulders and taking his son, Aeneas, by the hand, embodying a living bridge between past and future, carrying memory behind him and possibility before him as he fled the burning city. This act alone became the foundation of his legacy, for it was not defined by what he conquered, but by what he chose to protect and continue. And as Aeneas and his companions journeyed across the sea, their path was marked by hardship, uncertainty, and divine intervention, as the gods themselves shaped and tested his course, reminding him repeatedly that his purpose extended beyond personal desire, beyond immediate comfort, and into something that required endurance, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment. One of the most defining moments of his journey came in Carthage, where he encountered Queen Dido, a ruler who offered him stability, connection, and the possibility of a different future, one where his wandering could end. Yet even in this moment of refuge, Aeneas was reminded of his greater purpose, that he was destined to found a new people, to establish what would become the roots of Rome. And though leaving meant personal loss and emotional sacrifice, he chose to continue, placing destiny above desire, a decision that reflects the weight of legacy, where what must be carried forward often requires letting go of what could have been. As his journey continued, Aeneas eventually reached the lands of Latium, where conflict once again arose, this time with local forces who resisted his arrival. And though he sought peace, he was drawn into battle, demonstrating that even those who carry purpose are not free from struggle. And in the confrontations that followed, Aeneas proved not only his strength, but his commitment to establishing something that would endure, ultimately securing his place and laying the foundation for what would grow into one of the most influential civilizations in history. Aeneas did not live to see the full realization of what he began, yet that is the nature of legacy, that it extends beyond a single lifetime, built through actions that create pathways for others to follow. And in this, his story reveals that legacy is not about immediate fulfillment, but about continuity, about the willingness to carry forward what matters, even when the outcome cannot yet be seen. In the end, Aeneas stands not as a conqueror, but as a carrier, a figure defined by his ability to hold together what was lost and what was yet to come, showing that legacy is shaped not by what we keep for ourselves, but by what we ensure continues, and that the true measure of a life is found not only in what is achieved, but in what is made possible for those who come after. As the embers of Troy became the spark of Rome, carried forward through a man who chose purpose over comfort, and in doing so shaped a future far greater than his own story alone. Story 3, the Yamato Lineage and the Divine Continuity. In the traditions of Japan, where history and mythology intertwine to form a continuous thread of identity, the Yamato lineage stands as one of the longest enduring royal lines in the world, rooted not only in governance, but in divine origin, tracing back to the sun goddess Amaterasu, whose light is said to have given rise to the imperial line, establishing a connection between heaven and the earth that would define leadership not as temporary position, but as a living continuity passed from generation to generation. And within this lineage, the emperor is not simply a ruler, but a symbol, a figure whose presence represents stability, tradition, and the unbroken flow of identity across time. The founding figure, Emperor Jimmu, is said to have established this line, guided by divine direction, marking the beginning of a structure that would endure through centuries of change, conflict, and transformation. And while the historical details blend with myth, the significance remains clear that leadership, in this context, is not defined by individual achievement alone, but by the ability to carry forward what has been entrusted, to maintain continuity rather than disrupt it, and to embody a role that extends far beyond a single lifetime. Throughout history, the Yamato line was persisted through periods of shifting power, where political authority moved between emperors, shoguns, and other governing figures. Yet even when direct control was diminished, the symbolic role of the emperor remained intact, reinforcing the idea that legacy is not always tied to visible power, but to enduring presence, to the ability to represent something constant in a world of change. And this continuity created a cultural anchor, a point of reference that allowed identity to remain stable even as circumstances evolved. Rituals and ceremonies such as enthronement rites reinforced this connection, linking each new emperor back to Amaterasu and the divine origin of the line, ensuring that the transition from one generation to the next was not seen as a break, but as a continuation, a reaffirmation that what began long ago was still present, still active, still being carried forward. And in this, the Yamato lineage reveals a different dimension of legacy, one that is not built through expansion or conquest, but through preservation, through the careful and intentional passing of identity, values, and responsibility across time. This story shows that legacy is not always about what is newly created, but about what is sustained, that the act of carrying something forward without losing its essence is itself a profound form of leadership, requiring discipline, awareness, and respect for what came before, and that the impact of a life can be found not only in change, but in continuity, in the ability to maintain a thread that others can follow. In the end, the Yamato lineage stands as a living example of legacy as continuity, where each generation becomes both recipient and guardian, holding what was given and ensuring it remains intact for those who will come after, reminding us that what endures is often not the most visible or dramatic, but the most consistent, the most aligned, the most faithfully carried forward, showing that legacy is not only what we create, but what we choose to preserve, protect, and pass on, forming a bridge across time that connects past, present, and future into a single unbroken story. Story 4. Charlemagne in the Shaping of an Empire. In the shifting landscape of early medieval Europe, where kingdoms rose and fell and the structure of power remained unstable, the story of Charlemagne emerges as one of both consolidation and transformation, a figure whose influence would extend far beyond his own lifetime, shaping not only territory, but identity, governance, and cultural direction across a vast region. And born into the Frankish kingdom in the 8th century, Charlemagne inherited not only land, but the responsibility to unify and strengthen a fragmented world. And through a series of campaigns, alliances, and strategic decisions, he expanded his realm, bringing together diverse peoples under a single structure. Yet his legacy is not defined by expansion alone, but by what he built within it. Charlemagne understood that control without cohesion would not endure, and so he focused on creating systems that could sustain the empire, investing in administration, law, and education, encouraging the preservation and copying of texts, and supporting what would later be known as the Carolingian Renaissance, a revival of learning and cultural development that ensured knowledge would not be lost in a time of transition. And in doing so, he shaped not only the present, but the intellectual future of Europe, creating a foundation upon which later societies would build. One of the most defining moments of his life came on Christmas Day, 800 CE, when he was crowned Emperor of the Romans by Pope Leo III in Rome, a moment that symbolizes the merging of political and religious authority, reinforcing his role not just as a king, but as a figure whose influence also deepened his responsibility. requiring him to maintain balance through a vast and diverse empire. Charlemagne's leadership was not without conflict, as his campaigns often involved force and resistance, reflecting the realities of his time. Yet even within this, his approach to governance revealed a broader vision, one that sought not only to expand, but to organize, to create a structure that would endure beyond his own life. And this is where his legacy takes its fullest form. Not in the battles themselves, but in the systems, institutions, and cultural shifts that remained after him. After his death, the empire he built would eventually divide, yet the influence of his reign did not disappear. It continued to shape the political and cultural landscape of Europe, influencing ideas of kingship, governance, and unity. And in this, Charlemagne becomes more than a ruler of his time, but a figure whose impact extended into the future, carried forward through structures that outlived him. This story reveals that legacy is not always found in permanence of form, but in persistence of influence. That what is built may change, divide, or evolve, that the ideas, systems, and directions established can continue to shape what comes after. That the true measure of leadership is not only in what is achieved within a lifetime, but in what continues because of it. In the end, Charlemagne stands as a figure of transition, one who bridges worlds, shaped systems, and created a framework that extended beyond his own era, showing that legacy is not simply what remains unchanged, but what continues to influence, adapt, and guide long after the original moment has passed. Hey everybody, welcome back in. Hope you enjoyed those 4 stories of the legacy. Those are 4 pretty big, significant things, right? And this is where it's fun to talk about and to see what is myth and
Right.
what is historical.
Yeah.
Because some of these lineages are being traced back to exactly where they said,
Yep.
right? The Yamato still be here if it wasn't hugely significant, right? Same with Mali down in the West African lineage. All of these just kind of show what it's hugely impacted by the resilience of 1 or 2 people, truly. It only takes 1 or 2 people to create something huge in the future. So with that, our lesson is that lives ripple forward. So it's kind of like you toss a pebble into a lake, right? That impact of that rock is what started it, but how far it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sometimes it gets weaker and weaker, but then all of a sudden you get that, whew, like in the middle of the ripples where all of a sudden there was a bigger curve.
Right.
That's kind of what our lives are.
Yeah.
That's the energy that we imprint into the world. So with that, our very first story is down in Mali. So as I was reading this story, I, was kind of hitting the chair because Sundiata and the rise of the Lion King, yet this is the story of the Lion King, right? The Lion King, yes, it's a Disney story, but that's a mythological tale. They just use the animal, so it's folklore, so it's technically a fable.
Right.
Because they're utilizing animals
to
tell the story. But part of this, it was kind of cool because I don't just think it's like Mufasa, right, alone. It kind of felt like Rafiki's story in the beginning. The animal, right? He's got a messed up leg, the monkey that can see into the future, right? He's got a messed up leg. He knows he has a greater purpose. He's set into exile. He doesn't fight it. He makes new alliances and creates a foundation for it. This kind of, and when you think about the live action Lion King, where it's Mufasa's story and Scar's story, you get to see that Rafiki, when I'm going to find my brother, he's going back home to this place he's never been before to find his brother. And it was Mufasa. It was the Lion King. So I felt like Sundiata was kind of showcasing both that story of Scar and Mufasa, but also Rafiki's. And how all of those individual players, it was their resolve that led to the Lion King, that led to the strongest West African, or one of the strongest cultures in Africa, if not the strongest in West Africa. And it reverberates into Disney, right?
Right.
So it's seen on all these different levels. But I thought it was cool that this one, and that's why I thought of Rafiki, it was not just physically he stood up, he rose, but it was symbolic too. meaning that that moment was necessary. Because, wow, he had it in him that whole time, but he was waiting to be tested. He was waiting to rise to the occasion. And I loved it. And it doesn't say that he did all by himself and that there wasn't help. No, he went out and discovered himself so that he could come back and rule. Right. And I really liked this story.
Yeah, no, it's really good. I enjoyed it. I like how you spun it to like bring in the Disney aspect to help me visualize it a little bit better.
We think about Rafiki and how they think because he's born deformed, there's something wrong with him. He's sent into exile. Scar sent into exile. Mufasa sent into exile, right? Even if they're running, that's exile.
Yeah.
These were all rightful in their own way. But, I mean, Mufasa's parents named him Mufasa. He wasn't a king, but that name means king. And so there was so much. The mother laid the foundation of this is where. Go here. Rafiki knew certain aspects, but he didn't share.
It's just that pull that you get to go do something and, hey, this is what you got to do.
And they all had the opportunity to rise.
Yeah.
So like some, Rafiki physically using his stick to rise up. Mufasa leaning on the gentler animals, right? The animals and going, a lion can't stop them, but a wildebeest pack could, right? An elephant pack could. And that just goes to show the different tribes when there was danger coming into attack. We have to come together, we have to create something else. And that's what this did. And I think that the Lion King is showing, obviously it's showing African culture in a lot of ways. I love how they did it with the live actions. They emphasize that a lot more, I think. But yeah, I think that it does symbolize Sundiata and all of that. And then we go into the second story where we've seen this before, Aeneas, but we've seen Remus and Romulus, the boys raised by the wolf that end up starting Rome, right?
Right.
Romulus. But as we were listening to this, we get to see that Aeneas, his life was suffering. That was his purpose, was you have to survive. You are going to be tested time and time again. And do not stop. You have to survive. You will never see what's to come from your suffering, but it's arguably one of the longest lasting civilizations. I mean, it's so influential, it extended into the United States, right? The Western world, the architecture and everything. And this is one of the first ones, right? We'll see that in a later story, how they extended to Europe, like created pretty much all the architecture for Europe. But this one is, he chose to bring two major things with him, symbols. His father, so the past of Troy, someone who stood in Troy's glory, himself, and then his child, who is just the future. Someone that was born of Troy, who can remember this, maybe not as much, but they are of Troy. And he took those, and I love how it emphasized you can fight and fall with what's already gone, or you can leave with a greater purpose. It wasn't abandonment. It was acknowledging. And I love how in the movie Troy, Paris hands the sword to him. As long as this sword is in the hands of a Trojan, Troy will never fall. Troy's story is a big emphasis on, they fought. But in the end, when they got into the wall, all of a sudden, Troy isn't a place. It's a people. Take the people with you. And it's Paris handing Hector's sword over. So it's again going back to Hector. A symbol of Hector will survive. We won't. Troy is gone. We'll be buried. Agamemnon made sure of that. We still are struggling to find Troy today. I think that's because the king knew, this king of kings knew that people got out. I bet that he tried to find every single Trojan after this and bring him down. But Aeneas was just a piece in a bigger line. It's like looking at a tree and seeing one branch that's like burned and damaged and destroyed, while the others are behind it and they're beautiful, perfect, and protected. They wouldn't be like that if it weren't for this branch in front of it. That's what I feel like Aeneas is. He doesn't get to see Rome. He doesn't get to see that the Trojans survive, and not only survive, but they've learned and they're creating something new, but they're not forgetting what was past. And so I really like that, but it also sucks. There are just generations that it's suffering. And I think about all the wars that we had and how many people were 18 and their name was called. And that was it. Or their birthday was called. And that was it. They were just meant to be soldiers in the bigger grand scheme of things.
Unfortunately, just another number.
And that's
way back.
Millions. And we're not just talking about Americans, right? We're not just talking about the Holocaust in general, but millions on all sides
of everything. Yeah.
There are just generation after generation of soldiers, of widows. And we talk about how nowadays kids don't have their parents. Kids were watching their parents die.
Yeah.
Seeing these wars happen, hearing about it.
And this is going on like overseas right now.
Yeah, it's still happening
as far as we know. I know we have viewers that are outside of the United States that there's quite a few that probably have seen or been affected by a lot of the stuff.
I've seen, we had some high numbers in France. When I went to France, there were soldiers everywhere.
Yeah.
Because France was one of the top places for potential terrorist attack.
That's so sad.
We were walking around and it was kind of cool. It's a different culture, obviously. And we went to England before that, and you don't mess with the guards.
Right.
The English guards. Like, you don't.
I don't know why people think it's so funny to do that, to like go up to them. It's like, grow up.
They're doing their best.
Have some respect.
But the French guards, they were like, it was cool.
Yeah.
To watch them work. They were very vantage points you could see in the cities where they would be at, where they were located, that could showcase the whole city. But yeah, the Eiffel Tower, the Eiffel Tower to the cathedrals in that area, hundreds of them.
I still want to go.
It was worrisome, but they weren't aggressive or anything. It was cool. And this was like 10
Well, they're
years
there
ago.
to protect you.
Yeah. And they're watching. They were acknowledging. They knew right away who were tourists, who were locals. But it was just kind of cool that people are still out there defending their places, defending their history, watching out, and still including others that you're not from here, but if you want to experience our culture, this is where.
Have some respect.
Yeah.
Go check it out. That's the biggest thing and that's what's unfortunate, I think, about us as Americans is when we do travel, so many people have ruined it for us. Because I feel like when I go over there, I'm going to be super respectful for what they've done through and all that. But you have so many people that are like, oh, Americans are this, that, and the next. And it's like, yeah, but not all of us. There's a bunch of dummies. But there's a bunch of dummies.
And so we go in and kind of just see through Aeneas that Troy didn't fall. And it's not just that. It's King Leonidas. It's every single ruler who has fallen. But their people went, we're a people. It will never fall. The blood within us carries forward, right? And that's why kings and that's why conquerors, they tried to spill all the blood. It wasn't just, we want it gory and stuff. No, they want the lineage gone. That's what it was.
Right.
We don't want these adversaries to rise back up.
Yep.
Because look at what they could do now already. There was, zero doubt in my mind that Hector's child was probably a prize.
Oh, I bet. Like gold.
Hector's wife, any connection to Hector.
I bet.
Same with like Odysseus' child, Achilles' child. All of these people where you have to sit and think, what will my legacy carry? And is it worth me doing that to someone? Having a child just for them to carry this burden that I had to. But we get to story 3 where it's completely about preservation of the lineage because there's a direct line to Amaterasu. This lineage is divine. That's why it's lived so long. It's not just the sense of, oh, we're better than everyone else in Japan. There was purpose. There was continuity. There was respect for the culture and serious protection. And then you look at how Japan, the placement of Japan, those waters fight for that island, right? And it makes you truly believe that the gods, there's something precious about Japan.
Right.
right? And then you go and you see these stories of these lineages, and it does kind of make you want to go there, right? I told you my mom was born in Japan, and my aunt was telling me some of the best places to go. She's like, spiritually, you want to go to these places.
Yeah, I would love to go.
And so that's why I have like 4 books on Japan over there in the travel guide. It's because that, like the monkey that's covering its ears, its mouth, its eyes, that's in Japan, the original set, like all that stuff. It's hugely spiritual. And I think there's so much with Japan that makes me jealous, and excited though too, because to watch a culture that, regardless of the times, our culture is who we are. Our history is part of us, our heritage. And evolving all this stuff. Yeah, absolutely. But there's something that you just got to look at some cultures and go, they did it right. I think, they're carrying on hundreds of years, thousands of years of history and are like, oh, we can prove it, but we don't need to. Because look at us. There's proof. And the earth, right, and the cherry blossoms that bloom at that certain time of year. And I've heard that is just, again, a mystical feeling to be there. The earth is just happy, but it's paying attention. It's very aware, I've heard as well. So story 3, I think, is just a beautiful story of, it wasn't focusing, and it's cool too, because in Japan, I don't know as much about the Japanese lineages as some of the more European, where it was kept in the family, and how it was cousins and all that stuff. Yeah, this one isn't so much as that as it is you protect the lineage and the culture. It wasn't so much about focusing on that. I'm sure that there was some of that. It was important who we marry, but how obsessed the Europeans empires were and how they didn't last as long, how they constantly have had upturned because of that, because of the infidelities, like King Henry VIII, how many wives he had, right? And now, we know it was probably his fault that he couldn't have a male heir. Right. But it was just like, even just looking back, you go, that's the only common denominator, yet they still let him slaughter everyone.
Right.
And then look at what happened with Europe. Like, that's where Scotland gets involved, France gets involved, England, and it's a huge religious, the Protestants versus the Catholics. And it wasn't about our European culture, all this. It was about the institution. Whereas Japan, it's about our culture as a whole. Our institutions are part of it. Yes, that's huge. But because we built it around our culture. Our education institution is built around our culture, not built around political stuff.
I think a lot of those Asian cultures are like that, not just Japan, but China too, obviously, with a lot of stories that we've read. And it's like, why is it so different there compared to practically everywhere else?
I think it's because of what we mentioned the other day, the one that went around writing it in stones, the religious tolerance in BCE, right? Religious tolerance. So it wasn't about brainwashing. And I'm not saying all religion is about brainwashing, but we're so obsessed with it in the Western thing. It's like, hey, it's nice to meet you.
I think it's because Western philosophy is pretty much, we have to go find something somewhere else. And it's like the Eastern is all within.
Yeah, well,
and that's the big difference.
Persecution, whatever it may be, some came over willingly. Others were indentured servants. Others were slaves. Or we had slaves coming from both the North and the South, right? Parts of the world, and are being ripped over. But there was just those few corrupt people that allowed that institution to continue. And it's a secret institution. Yep. It's that. Yeah, it's scary. But
so I can get dressed.
Story 4, Charlemagne. So I told you that my mom has traced our lineage back to Charlemagne. So it's kind of cool. And I'm saying that knowing that Charlemagne also is a conqueror, massive landscape, the French and German stuff heavily, right? So that's where you see a lot of the Norse and Germanic stuff kind of bleed into France because of Charlemagne, right? So these origins that go back. But what's interesting is Charlemagne is such a prominent figure because of the popes, because they went, oh, this guy's got a handle on a lot of land, a lot of people. And so we're going to make him emperor of the Romans. Pope Leo the Third, I believe, is one of the people I got into my 41 to 43 lives that I put together. One of the Leo popes is.
Oh, really?
And I can't remember if it's this one or if it's the one that shut down Luther.
Yeah.
And that's why he's famous. It's for trying to shut down Luther. But yeah, I do have one of them.
That's fine.
As one of the lives.
That's awesome.
But this laid a huge framework for all of Europe, right? We can say Charlemagne, yeah, Germany and France, it's a lot. It was a lot bigger than that. He had so much territory that it spanned beyond what he could really reach. So it was important that everyone had a common goal, everyone had a common belief, and here's what we stand for. Because the fact of the matter is that when there's so much land, if you're just this total, people at the corners are going to start to reach out beyond and get help and stuff. So he did realize too that there is a little bit of a balancing game.
Right.
Of I am uniting with the church, and I'm stepping forward with that. But it's also talking about the ideas, systems, and direction established can continue to shape what comes after. So the true measure of leadership is not only what is achieved within the lifetime, but what continues because of it. So it's what continues. And no, I'm not saying the battles, right? The Protestants versus the Catholics, the pagans versus literally both of the other two, right?
Right.
But instead of not the institution of religion, but a belief in God, right, can be carried forward. So yeah, there is always corruption everywhere we go, but cut all of that out. And what's the core belief? That's what we're all driven by. Even if you don't believe in this God or that God or this philosophy, you believe in something, right? The earth, whatever it may be. And we're all driven by those things. We're all driven by, we need to see actions, right? Or even if someone is manipulating you, time and time again, you see those patterns. And that's where our brain starts to kind of crack on itself. Because it's like, you're believing these words.
Yeah.
But I'm experiencing this. And so a leader that can, these are my actions and this is who I am, but here's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, at least he's kind of being honest. At least you know what he's doing. There isn't as much wonder and mystery. And yeah, the mystery of being a leader, you shouldn't be a mystery. You should be someone that's like, this is what I'm doing.
Why I'm doing it.
This is why I'm doing it. And we're creating
to an extent, though, also because there is strategy involved with some things that you.
Yeah, but military stuff, yeah, I totally understand that part. But I'm saying your purpose, your mission, and then to have a mission, but to behave differently from your mission.
Right. No, your actions and words need to be in line to be, I think, a good leader.
And I believe Charlemagne splits up the empires to his children. So while he inherited part, then he splits it up, and that's where you start to see the divide of the places and stuff. But that's always how it is. It is hard, I think, when we look at, wow, King Leonidas, right? Charlemagne, Hector. Those kids are raised with that. That's what they have to live up to.
Yeah.
Hector died with his city. And when he died, the city fell, right? Aeneas carrying forward the lineage to just suffer, but he did it. So how can you complain? How can you complain coming forward? Charlemagne having this huge thing, and then, oh, well, our dad did it by himself. And now we're splitting it up and we're causing this rift, and now we're creating our own places. There's a lot of pressure that we put on, like lineages, though, as well. And you see Japan stepping up to it. West Africa stepping into what you're creating and having that responsibility, but also the help of others going, yeah, you do bear a bigger responsibility, but for our nation, for our culture, for our community. Yeah, there's a little bit of selfishness we need to have. Japan isn't worried about the United States continuing their culture, right? We get upset when Russia or China says we're a joke. Who cares? It doesn't matter to China if we survive. look at all the resources. Look at all this stuff. They can help, right? Russia, they can help. Everyone thinks we can help you guys. That's what America's doing in the Middle East, right? We can help you guys. We got to kind of step back and go, who are the people that are actually on board with us? Who are our actual people? And let's serve them. Let's protect them. That
I
doesn't
think the
mean
biggest thing is
destroy.
you got to help yourself before you can help anything else.
Well, it's like you're on an airplane. Who's the first person you got to put the mask on?
Always yourself. That's the biggest thing. We, I think, as a society, have forgotten that. Help our communities, and then the stronger your community is, like, and I'm not saying fighting wise, but stronger is in like togetherness, faith wise, spirituality, that will spread. You don't have to go around and knock on a door and say, hey, be spiritual with me. No, you just be who you are, and it's just going to spread.
And you allow others.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing.
Let your light shine.
With what you just said as well, is you can't do it alone.
No.
We kind of had a little bit of that talk yesterday. There is that burden that some people have, men, to protect. How hard is it for a man to fulfill that duty when he doesn't have protection for himself? Someone that's willing to be by his side and protect him during his battles. That's important too. You don't see them so much, the women coming in now, because the man bared that burden of you have to survive. And he did survive through the help of others, right? But ultimately, it's still on him. And so we have to remember that while you have a burden, if there aren't people in your corner to help you, how can any of us carry on?
Yeah.
And so with that, our daily thread is that today we enter the legacy, where what was built begins to echo forward. Through Sundiata, we see the legacy is created through what is built after rising. Through Aeneas, we learn that legacy is carried, not just achieved. Through the Yamato lineage, legacy is sustained through continuance. Through Charlemagne, legacy shapes systems that outlive the individual. Each story reminds us that impact does not end with us. What are you building that will continue beyond your presence? Legacy is the life your actions continue to live. What I really love about this today is history rewrites people all the time. And we're seeing now that the people that rewrote it left gaps. They thought that the actions of some of these men and women would die with them. And they're not. And you're seeing a lot of people stepping up going, we buried a lot of heroes, a lot of people, a lot of legacy, lineage.
Imagine how many names have been forgotten of things in the past, stories that we unfortunately will never get to hear because of the victors, and they could have been amazing stories.
Well, and I was actually thinking of more of you and I right now, and how things are being said and people are going, you know what? I've met those two. I've been around them during stress, crisis. Their actions aren't matching your words of them. And it's so cool that people, like kids, having the courage to go, you're lying. I know them. It's awesome. And people can be mad and upset, and you can form this narrative in your head. I did it with my parents too. This narrative, my parents are out to get me and against me. They were just trying to protect me, but they knew they had to step back because I wasn't accepting them, and painful that must have been for them. But there's a little bit of our own self. When we listen to the narratives and listen to the he said, she said, look at the actions. Look at the behaviors, those will outlive us. And we're seeing it now. People are like, you know what? I've seen who you are and I've seen who you are. I'm starting to believe that you're creating this narrative of other people to protect yourself.
Right.
We're seeing it left and right, and it's fallen apart. Because the hard thing is, and I learned this young, my early 20s, I was a liar. My teens, I was a liar. It catches up.
Yeah.
Because you cannot remember every lie you've told.
Yeah.
You cannot remember the tone. And that's the thing, is your emotion behind it. Well, you didn't have this in it last time.
Right.
I've noticed that you're continuing to look more like a victim. Or I'm seeing that you're taking more accountability where you shouldn't have. Like, you start to see both sides. And so sometimes it's just write it down. That's what happened, and leave it at that. But our actions will ripple beyond anything else. But with that, our question of the day is, what will remain of me? It's not always what we want to remain, right? How many people wanted their children to rise up and be great like them? And we see that the child tried to destroy what the parent created, right? Or that the child rises up and is better. What will remain of us is truly what possibilities do we want to be open for others because of us? And so we're going to think about that today. And we're going to write one line. We're going to write one line of a message that represents what we wish to leave behind. So just a one line, what we wish to leave behind when we're gone. And then we're going to remember that lives echo through what they set in motion. It's not that we love because of what Aeneas did, or we have resilience because of Sundiata. No, maybe we don't connect love to those people, but they've created an environment where love can be given, right? Through the tolerance, through the understanding. You see the systems are there through what other people. So yeah, our names may not remain, but they may have created opportunities for others that will never understand that because of what we've done, they're able to do what they will do. So with that, today we have 4 more days left of March, and then we're done with season 3. But we got to go celebrate someone's birthday. Double digits. So,
Jeez, the big old decade.
yeah, we got to go. We got important stuff to do. Thank you guys for coming in, though, and we will see you tomorrow. Guys.